David Esposito. It's great to be talking about leadership, career transitions, all of those kind of things that professionals navigate over their career journey. Certainly, with the onset of artificial intelligence and a number of other factors in the marketplace, professionals are thinking about various things in their journey and their career positioning and where they stand, not only with their company, but perhaps where they can get to a new area of growth in their career. So, super excited today to have Dr. Alexandra Elinsky on the call today. She shares a number of these topics, provides leadership consultation to a number of professionals over the years, also works with professionals as they think about career transitions. And I can also attest to Alexandra's expertise in providing me guidance on how I've led a number of teams, how I also think about my own career in the marketplace, and how we scale up my company. So I've been grateful for her support that she's had for me, and I know we're going to enjoy a great conversation today with you. So Alexandra, welcome to the program.
Thank you, David. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome. So maybe we talk a little bit about, for those that don't know you as well as I do, and certainly those maybe picking up, you're very active on LinkedIn and providing some updates. So maybe you could just take a moment and give people a little bit of your own professional background, how you've come to do what you're doing here. I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah, David, thank you. What a great question. So, as David introduced, I'm Dr. Alexandra Elinsky. I'm the CEO of Empower Human Potential LLC. We are a B2B and B2C business where we provide corporate outplacement services, executive and leadership development programs, some corporate training on the business side, the enterprise side, and then on the consumer side of what we do, very similar. We work with professionals and executives on an individual coaching or career coaching development basis where I help professionals land their next role. So, what that looks like, people come to me for two very distinct reasons. They usually want to level up in their career. So, maybe that's going into management, director, vice president, even C suite. And they want to make more money. So, they really want to know, like, how do I position myself? How do I sell myself? How do I build confidence? What are the tools and processes and roadmaps I should have in place? So, like I said, very similar services, two different service lines. And that's what I have been doing for the last 12 years. Prior to that, I was actually a business professor at some different colleges. So I called myself the go-to girl because I taught a myriad of different business courses, anything from HR to accounting to marketing to professional development, communications, business law, culture, diversity. So, pretty comprehensive. I really, really, really enjoyed teaching. I enjoyed connecting with the students. And while I was teaching at one of the colleges, how I got into this line of work is that at the time, the director of career services scouted me and says, "Hey, you'd be really good working with the students, the externs, the interns, doing some resume writing, some placement." So, I dipped my toes into that. I got some experience and exposure. And then because I sort of had like more of a natural knack for it and I enjoyed the work, probably less than 6 months later, I founded this company and I started with nothing, honestly, no capital. And I just kind of built it with my bare hands and it's growing and we're doing different things and I'm expanding my career as much as I can. And I really just have a heart of service and quality, and I love to provide value. I love to connect with people and help people. I'm definitely a relationship builder through and through. I believe in human potential, and one of my best skills is listening. And so that makes people feel very comfortable with me, even within, the first 1 minute of talking. And so I've, used that as to really help people in their careers and really help businesses as well develop their people and promote their people and, we call it upskilling. So it's been a journey, it's been a ride, and I'm excited to see what the future holds.
Awesome. No, thank you very much for that background. Boy, you highlighted some things I wasn't aware of as well. So that's terrific on the breadth of experience. And I can certainly attest to your ability to be a great listener and be able to help guide leaders like myself in other areas. So I really appreciate that. Maybe a question or two as we think about the journey of leadership today. What are you seeing are one of the real key areas you're coaching leaders on? Is it how to assess some of these new technologies? How do the fundamentals build a team? How do they see their own ability to communicate amongst all this change? Yeah, I'm just curious to say in your day to day work with leaders, what areas do you find you focusing more in to help them be better leaders?
My goodness, what a phenomenal question. I could probably answer this in like the next 30 minutes, but I will keep it brief and succinct as I can.
Okay.
So many interesting bullet points here, David. But one of the ones that I think has been kind of more of a recent challenge, and you mentioned technology, you mentioned AI. I mean, those are certainly huge players. Um, but really just intergenerational dynamics, right? So you have baby boomers still in the workforce. You have Gen X, Gen Y. I'm a Gen Y, I'm a millennial, and Z, the Zoomers, right? So you have at least four generations, and the leadership level, the workplace dynamics and what these people want, what their aspirations are, even their expectations vary so significantly. And just being able to know how to communicate with each other, understand each other, and know how to support one another because there's so much contrast and there's so much complexity with these different generations. It becomes a challenge to really align them and to get them on the same page and to get them to see eye to eye and really to understand the value that each generation brings to the table. So we have a very unique challenge here. And I think it's going to be important for all the generations to do a lot of introspection on themselves and really do their due diligence in understanding, like, what's out there, right? And how do other people operate and how do they work, right? So that's certainly one of the ones that I see quite a bit. The other one is a lot of like social intelligence, emotional intelligence, navigating, working with different personalities, and this idea of also self advocacy, right, in the workplace as well. So one of the buzzwords I've heard a lot lately is this idea of psychological safety, right? Right. And when I think of psychological safety, I think of self advocacy, being able to contribute to ideas, being able to speak up and, say what's on your mind without being scared, without feeling threatened, without feeling like you don't have a voice, without feeling like you don't matter or that there's too much hierarchy and politics in the workplace. So I would say those two are some of the bigger challenges. And really just, of course, as I'm a people developer, that's what I call myself. I'm a people developer, and I'm working with leaders who are working with among so many different teams and systems and processes and complexities and departments. So it becomes paramount for them to really cultivate, harness, and upskill their people skills, right? If you're a people leader, then you have to have people skills. Well, not every people leader has people skills.
Right.
And so there's a lot of work that I do and just really guiding and navigating them and empowering them in how they pass it on and how they lead, right? And how they promote and how people really contribute to the workplace and to the mission of whatever their organization values and what they're trying to do. So I would say those are the biggest concepts that I'm seeing. But of course, like I said, this is a question that we could probably talk about for hours in and of itself.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to reconnect on a broader topic. I mean, one follow-up question maybe to that, and
Yeah.
maybe probably one we could go really deep on, but maybe just curious to your initial thoughts. Like when I think about the complexity of communicating across these various generational differences, it's hard to not also address this transition we've made through COVID, where a lot of hybrid work versus face to face. I mean, I consider myself in the workforce over 30 years, like a little bit of a old school, grew up face to face, mentoring in the hallways, all of those kind of things. And That is a whole new dynamic that adds to the complexities of leadership. Maybe just touch briefly on that whole hybrid, virtual, pure face to face in the complexity of coaching leaders. Yeah, just curious to your thoughts on
Yeah, this is definitely one where I feel like everybody's going to have a very different opinion on. And I would say, David, out of 9 out of 10 people that I talk to at any level, whether they're a recent grad or they're even like a vice president, C-suite senior leader, 9 out of 10 want remote work. They don't want to be in the office, maybe hybrid at most.
that. Okay. Yeah.
I also am very opinionated on this subject, and I do believe that there are pros and cons. There are pros to being physically present in an office and working with people and just having that sense of presence and visibility, which, like you said, going back 10 plus years ago, that was the norm. That was the expectation. You showed up to work and you were there. There was no working from home one day a week or every other week. But now it seems like it's something everybody wants. And that's because we got acclimated to that in COVID. So now it's become a thing. Now it's normalized. Everybody's kind of, fighting for it, right?
Yeah.
And it is a challenge because you don't have that sense of presence. You don't have that sense of visibility in the same capacity.
Hmm.
So the challenge then becomes if you are remote, if you are hybrid, if that's even something that you want and are trying to get or aspire to, there has to be a system or a practice in place for connection,
Great point.
for engagement,
Right.
for teamwork. Because if you're working in a team, whether it's virtual or remote, you have to have that connection, that engagement, and that teamwork, right? You can't just be doing your work and not communicating with anyone. So it's tricky, and I don't know if I even have the answers. I don't even know if I have enough expertise to talk about that. But it's a great point you make because when we think about like the future of work, what's next? Now we've got AI all over the place. Like
Right.
we have to think about what does this look like. Now, I will tell you in conjunction to this that I am a huge advocate for performance-based models.
Hmm.
So when I hire someone, I wouldn't hire them to be like physically there or even check a bunch of boxes or micromanage and say, what are you doing today? What are you achieving? If you're getting results, if you're performing, I don't care if you work 2 hours a day if you're getting me the results that I want. So there's a lot that I can say. And like I said, I'm an advocate myself for remote work because I worked remote way before COVID, but that's because I value flexibility and autonomy.
Yeah.
So we also have to think about, are we letting people be autonomous without micromanaging them? But are we also fostering connection and engagement because that's part of it and they have to marry each other?
Yeah, those are great points. No, I think that at the end of the day, clear objectives and then fostering that part of engagement and teamwork is can be done in all these different environments. It just causes a little. You got to be a little more intentional about it than perhaps maybe in the old days of just having a lunchroom chat with somebody. So no, I think that's really good, and no, appreciate that comment. Maybe to that point, maybe another question around. I know you do a lot of work with people thinking about career transitions and maybe even in outplacement services that you have. And I'm kind of curious to what are you seeing in those trends right now in terms of career transitions? Is it people that are just maybe fed up with their environment, they're looking for something new, or they're wanting to be more kind of entrepreneurial and they feel like they're in a big company in a cube all day? Yeah, I'm just curious when you talk about career transitions and coach people, what are you seeing are the kind of big things that you'd want to share?
Yeah, those are some great points, David, and definitely gives us something to think about and consider for sure. One of the things that I see quite often when people come to me at their current company is this idea of there being, no growth, right? No growth opportunities, but they have this like an insane sense of loyalty, which is admirable for sure,
Mhm.
but
Sure.
loyalty isn't necessarily going to get you a raise, right?
Right.
So sometimes I have to be the one to tell them, like, I admire your loyalty, but you're stuck there's no room for growth, it's time to move on, right? So I serve as that bridge or accelerator to help them navigate that process. So that's one person that comes to me.
Got it.
Other people come to me when they want to build their confidence and they really want to polish themselves, particularly for a vice president or a C-suite role,
Mhm.
because those roles are few or far between. They're much harder to come by. The competition is fiercer. So you really have to have your ducks in a row, right? You really have to dot I's, cross T's, strategically position yourself and give yourself a competitive advantage. So then there's those group of people. And then recently, we have seen, especially in the last year, year and a half, like so much AI, which has made so many people redundant. So then there's the redundant cohort that come to me. So they're just like out of a job and
Wow.
they've been applying, left and right, and they're getting 100 rejections a week and they're discouraged. They're emotional. So it's like, those are the ones I've got to calm down, tell them everything's going to be okay. It's okay to feel the way that you do. We're going to work through this pragmatically. And for them, and I tell them like, yes, they need a job. I get that. You need a job ASAP. But for me, it's never about getting a job because at the end of the day, anybody can get a job. It's culture fit. It's what are your skills? What do you want? What do you
Mhm.
excel at? What is the value that you bring to the table? Let's identify those things. Let's also identify your blocks and challenges and create a roadmap and a timeline and have some SMART goals built in, right? Where we can get you to land in 90 days, maybe 120 days or less. So I would say those are the three groups that I see most often. Um, but, gone are the days, right, of staying at a company for, 10 plus years. My dad was with his employer for like 40 years, but that was that generation. That's just what you did.
Yeah.
But to that point, David, I think the idea here is that everybody is required to be agile. Everybody is required to pivot when necessary. And with AI, I have so many people telling me, I'm taking these courses, I'm taking these certifications, I'm learning what I can, I'm using what I can, and really integrating AI and using it as leverage, right? Versus a curse, versus an advantage, like just using it as leverage to do what they need to do. And I
Yeah.
just remembered, I almost forgot, the last group of people are the wannapreneurs, as we call it. Like they just want to be entrepreneur. They just want to transition into entrepreneurship because they have this skill set, they have this business idea, and now they need to know how to execute. So for those aspiring entrepreneurs, I'll take them under my wing and I'll help them build. And like I told you a few minutes ago, I started with nothing, right? I think I have some tips and tricks and best practices how to get launched because I'm one of those people. I never saw myself as an entrepreneur. I've got relentless grit, but at the end of the day, I wanted that job security that most people want. And when you're an entrepreneur, like you eat what you kill. Like, you are commission only. There is no stability. You're going to have highs and lows, peaks and valleys, good months and bad months. And you're going to have to learn how to ride the tide and have that level of resilience and tenacity. Because I heard a quote, I can't tell you where it's from, but people who have been, successful lifelong entrepreneurs always say that the only reason they made it is because they had relentless tenacity. That was the only reason, is that they never gave up even when they wanted to give up. And there have been times, many times, and you know this personally, where I've wanted to close the doors on my business, where I wanted to give up.
Yeah.
And that happens more than most people want to admit. But, it's like what's inside of you, right? What's inside of you that's pushing you forward. So when I get prospects that jump on a discovery or a strategy call with me, it's really about identifying like, where they've been, where they're at, and where they're going and create a plan. It's that simple.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. No, thanks for sharing those. 'Cause I think it highlights to what I've known of you, but certainly to our audience. You've got a breadth of experience that can really hold people accountable to make a plan and execute on a plan. That's really important because I think you
Yes.
you touched on something that I think your value in the marketplace, a coach like yourself, whether it was to me or to others, I know it that the ability to see clearly when perhaps somebody like myself is in the ring doing stuff, to have a coach like yourself who is bold enough to say, No, you've been stuck for a while. Face the music or something like that to be able to advance their career. People need that. You serve that as a valuable role to me, and I know you're doing it to others, and that's terrific. And I think people certainly need that, for sure. I think you mentioned a couple of these dimensions that, boy, it just there are a lot of needs out there. I'm curious. I see a lot and know of a lot of the work that you do specifically for female leaders in helping them either navigate a career path. I'm kind of curious. One is to kind of is there a different dimension or a set of skills that you find you're working more with female leaders to work on, and then maybe a follow up to that is, just so our audience, like, how do you kind of physically work with people? Are these just kind of like one-on jump starts, or do you have usually a longer term engagement with people? Just if you could talk a little specifically about what I know you've developed a wonderful relationship specific to female leadership, and then how you work with them would be great.
Yeah, this is another great question. And I've actually gotten this question before. So I do work a lot with female leaders, but I'm not exclusive to them. And I would say that my path has been 50-50, half women, half men, actually. Like I get a lot more men that hire me than probably most people would like assume. Like
Okay.
I think there's a lot of guys out there that either would select a female coach or would feel comfortable with one for whatever the reason. I mean, even when I was considering a coach, like I wasn't just considering female coaches, I was actually considering some male coaches because I felt like the males could potentially be harder on me, and that's what I wanted.
I see.
So, it really does depend, and the capacity that I work with them. So on the consumer side, I offer two very simple and straightforward programs. So when they enroll, there's a bit of an onboarding process they go through, and then I customize their program a little bit for them and give them some tools and resources that are like freebies. I don't charge extra for that.
Yeah.
And then the structure is I do Zoom calls and it's a 1 hour session. So on that side of the business, it is one-on-one coaching. I know there's a lot of coaches that do group coaching.
Hmm.
Not that I wouldn't do it. I just love the personalized approach. I love working with someone one-on-one because I feel like when it's group coaching, you're talking to the group, right? It's almost like becoming training at that point. Like, but when it's one-on-one, we can tackle what their needs, goals, and wants and desires are. So that is what I've always offered. We'll see if I ever dip my toes into group coaching. I mean, it's definitely an option. And then on the B2C, I'm sorry, the B2B side, very similar model. I have a couple of programs. They enroll certain people. Now I do more group stuff on that side. So if they have a group of, say, 20 managers that they wanted to enroll in the group coaching, that would be like a 2 hour engagement once a month for a 6 month period or a 12-month period. But also similar to that, say they enrolled 10, vice presidents in my individual coaching, I offer 6 months and 12 months programs as well that are renewable. And again, they get onboarded, they get their call cadence set up, and they make their way through that program. And it's very structured. So we identify what they want to work on in the front end, but sometimes that changes halfway through the program. And sometimes we have to shift and pivot. So for my female leaders, they definitely like being empowered. They like working on their confidence. They like overcoming, some of the micro aggressions that they've experienced in their careers and just navigating the complexity and demands of motherhood and work-life balance and feeling like they're working, 18-hour days. So there's unique challenges to the person, and men similarly go through very unique challenges. So I don't want to discredit them in any way. I mean, the bottom line, David, is that when you're an adult, when you're adulting, no matter what you're doing, where you're working or who you're working with, it's hard. And actually, it's funny. I know you're going to mention my books later, but I'm writing my fourth book now, which is about the psychology and philosophy of money and success. And I was just writing a section today, actually, a couple hours before this call, about the hustle and the grind and how we all do that and what that looks like, what that entails, and it's hard to sometimes wake up every day when you've got kids and a career and just constantly be moving, without a whole lot of downtime.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Well, you touched on it. Let's go there, and we could come back to a couple other questions. I think I've admired the number of books. You're a prolific author, award-winning author, covering a number of topics. I'm just really impressed with that side of your life, in addition to what you do in coaching. Maybe share a little bit of your journey as an author, what you write about, the intent of that, and yeah, and thanks for teeing up the newest book coming too. Yeah, anything you want to share about that? I think that's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I've always had a bit of a creative bone in my body that I've leveraged in different ways since childhood, always been a creative. And probably for the last 10 years, I was one of those people that I was going around telling everybody, I'm going to write a book someday. I'm going to write a book someday. And I had, oh my goodness, I vacillated on so many ideas back and forth, back and forth. I actually tried writing a book maybe 6 years ago in 2020 and then just canned it. I just did not feel the spark. I just did not have a connection and I couldn't decide on a topic. Well, anyway, in summer of 2022, I was on vacation in Florida by myself and I was swimming in the pools, a hot summer day, and the idea, it just struck me like lightning. And I came home, I started writing the first book. I finished it within 5 months. I think maybe 5 or 6 months later, 5 or 6 months after that, I secured a publisher. And then I went right into the second, right into the third. Now I'm on the fourth, and there will be a fifth. So it's a 5 book series. So the fourth book will be coming out later this year. The fifth one probably next year, at the beginning of the following year. But essentially, what it is, it's a empowerment, it's a self-help nonfiction empowerment book for women that is supposed to create a confident, bold, and gritty woman. And so what I want to do, or what I've done with what I think I've done with the series, is I really wanted to cover a lot of ground. I'm not going to be able to touch on everything. I'm not going to be able to resonate with everyone, but I wanted to really create like a comprehensive case, which is why I did 5 books. So in the first book, it actually starts in like girlhood, pretty much from the day we're all born. And I address in the first part of the book, different challenges and common problems. I try to select topics that I think are a little bit more common across the board versus being very specific and nuanced. Like, for example, somebody told me you should write about, infertility, but I didn't feel like an expert on that. And I felt like it was a little bit more niche. So I decided to stay away from that. So I selected these topics, and each book, does follow a specific theme. And I'm kind of like building this case. And the books themselves I really call them like coaching books, because at the end of every single chapter, there's like questions, like journal prompts that relates to the reader, their story, their experiences. Share your experience, share your story, or this is your time to share your story, and really helps them connect the dots to the chapter's topic and intent. So, the first book really deals with kind of resilience and overcoming hardship, because we've all been through things. Life is anything but easy. So it's important to really look at what those problems are. And then I also deal a lot like with relationships, parent-child relationships, being a parent, being a single parent, being divorced, being married, romantic relationships. I deal a lot with that in like the second book, because relationships are one of the biggest things in our lives, right? Um, and then the third book, I start to talk about like success and, well, actually, the third book's technically about spirituality and power. So that's the overarching theme. I take spirituality and power and I connect it to success and really just being transformed, right? Being emotionally grounded, being a secure human being, getting rid of attachments, and really kind of that self-development piece. And then, as I mentioned, the fourth book is about the philosophy and the psychology of money and success, because career and money, financial, that's another big piece of everybody's life, And then I talk a little bit about health and wellness. So we've got, mental health, physical health, how to take care of your body. So as you can see, there's a pretty complex and dynamic scope. Not that I'm going to be able to cover everything in 5 books, but the idea is that it will resonate with the readers and they will be able to extrapolate some kind of value from it.
Got it.
Um, because
Wow.
I say the books are like, coaching and training. So if somebody like for some reason, cannot afford to work with me but still want my coaching, well, you can go buy the $20 book on Amazon. Like I'm pretty sure everybody can afford a $20 book. So, it's just another way to like expand your expertise, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. No, what you described as you were working through that, and what I remember from having you shared some of those in the past in the books is that um, that is a whether you call it professional coaching in the workplace or personal coaching on the outside of work life. I always see those two interrelated and blending and interdependent. So
Yeah.
I imagine the uptake on even in your one-on-one coaching probably bleeds a little bit into that personal coaching. It's just hard to separate the two. I wonder if you wanted to share some thoughts on just that dynamic of, hey, you're coaching leaders, but to your point, leaders are moms or dads or in relationship, out of relationship, and some of your writings really help to guide people on a really solid path through those complexities, ups and downs, tragedies of life. Yeah, maybe share a little bit how your authorship kind of bleeds into day-to-day coaching as well.
This is a fabulous, fabulous question. I love this question so much because it's so important and so critical, and it's definitely something we need to think about. So, just for a tiny bit extra context for the audience here, is that my degree, I'm an IO psychologist. So, that's otherwise known as a business psychologist. Not everybody knows what that is. So, I wanted to clarify for the audience because people are always like asking me, what do you do? Who do you work with? I know it's kind of a little bit more niche. So, I work at the intersection of business and psychology because I love both. Like, I got my bachelor's in psychology thinking I was going to be a clinical psychologist at some point. And then I got my MBA in finance because it was practical, and then merged the two in my doctorate. And it was just the perfect fit because I'm a businesswoman through and through, and I'm a psychologist through and through. So, your question really makes me think of that because when we look at like the whole person, when we look at an individual, when we look at a leader, whether it's a man or a woman, their life is comprised of psychology, right? That's what makes us human, is that humanistic component of who we are, being a whole person. And there's so many psychologists out there that focus on whole person development and really the dichotomy of, here's your career, here's your professional life, your professional identity, but you're also a daughter, a son, a wife, a husband, a mother, a father, a friend, an aunt and uncle. You're all these things, right? And we play all these roles. Every single person has at least 10 roles, maybe more. And so the tricky part here is integration. And Carl Jung is actually the psychologist that talks about integration and the whole person and really taking the different parts of ourselves inside and who we are as professionals, as humans, and being able to integrate that. So when I look at like work and work-life balance, there is no separation, right? At the end of the day, we're all human with professional identities, with talents and skills where we contribute for a paycheck or to make our living. But we're also people outside of the organization. We're also self leaders. We're also leaders for our spouse, our children, even our parents. Sometimes we're enlightening our parents about the things
Right.
we've learned, because this is the age of information and we have so much access to information now compared to generations and decades ago. So to answer your question and really kind of tie this all together is that in my line of work, in my practice, I don't separate the two. So when I work with a new coaching participant, whether it's on the consumer or the enterprise side, doesn't matter who it is, they complete a pretty comprehensive survey where it goes through 7 different areas of their life. And they have to rate satisfaction in each area. And then it gets into some nuanced details where they answer very specific questions. And I take that survey and I read it from an IO lens and I identify patterns and themes and I'll give them recommendations. I'll give the participant recommendations and they'll come back with, their feedback ideas. And then we'll marry those two together And that's what I use to customize their journey. So a lot of times these, vice president, and I've coached a number of vice president, a number of C-suite members, C-suite leaders, and at the end of the day, they're all human. They're all people, and the beautiful thing is that I don't see ego. I don't see ego. I see a person. I see a person with problems. I see a person who has been hurt in the past. I see a person that, wants to improve themselves and learn and grow. And they're open to receiving that coaching and that self-discovery process because it's not me necessarily advising you. It's not me telling you what to do. It's me guiding that process so that you come to the conclusions on your own, and
Yeah.
I'm affirming you, every step of the way. So I leverage these different, psychologists, these different tools. I read a ton of business books. I read a ton of leadership books. I read whatever I'm interested in because I'm a personal growth, personal development junkie. I take certification after certification. I read book after book, and I don't claim to be like a know-it-all, and I don't claim to have all the answers. Like I'm a student just as much as I am the teacher. And it's really that integrative approach to focusing on the person because that's what's going to propel them forward, not just as a professional, but also as a parent, also as a partner, just also as a citizen.
Yeah. No, wonderful points. I agree wholeheartedly with the inability or just impractical approach of separating all those things. So it's great to hear, and I'm glad you highlighted how you integrate those roles and certainly to touch on your education and background that brings that forward. That's awesome. No, we covered a lot of ground on this. I feel like there's much more we should be talking about on this, but in the nature of trying to keep timely with these, I'd say, Alexander, is there anything else maybe you want to conclude with, share with the audience with regards to your background or coaching or what you can add to the marketplace?
Yeah, being an HR person, essentially, I like to tell everybody that I have an open door policy and that I don't bite. So if you ever want to connect with me, you're more than welcome to connect with me on, LinkedIn or Instagram. We can set up a call, a free consultation. I don't charge for those. There's no obligation to work with me. I don't twist arms. I don't put any pressure on anybody. Like I said, the invitation is open. And if you want to connect, I love growing my network.
Awesome. That's a great point, and one I wanted to ask you. Is it best for people to catch up with you on LinkedIn or website or anything like that you'd like to put out?
Yeah, definitely LinkedIn. You can simply search my name. I come up right away. And then my website is www.empower, H as in hippo, P as in penguin.org. So it's empowerhp.org. That's my professional company website. And like I said, just shoot me a DM. I live on LinkedIn literally, so I'll probably respond within, 6 to 10 hours, and we can start a conversation. If you're interested on the enterprise side, coaching and training for your people, or you're interested on the consumer side where you're ready to level up in your career and maybe find, some new employment, we can connect. And even if we don't end up working together, the call is always valuable.
Awesome. Dr. Alexandra, thanks so much for sharing your time and your wisdom. We really appreciate having you on the program.
Thank you so much, David. It was an honor, and I really appreciate you inviting me. Thank you again.